financial resources. Where does political will come from? You know, we are living in a parliamentarian democracy. If people in India, and not just poor people, but the middle class in particular, were marching on the streets demanding these rights for every citizen of India, you would see that political will very quickly. It's the fact that, you know, these two Indias are living so separately that though the middle class really don't care whether every poor child is in school or not. So it's getting active citizenship from every citizen of India, getting them involved in the development agenda. And I think once we do that, both the political will come and the financial resources will come.
So there's a high level of apathy which is being witnessed in our country.
Yes.
There's an indifference level. If it's, as long as it's not happening to me, I'm not bothered about it.
Right.
But how's the response in other countries? Is there active citizenship notion in other countries? They're very keenly involved in policies?
In other countries that are more homogeneous, you know, you feel much more closer to your neighbor. The fact that we are such a fragmented society, we really think about who, you know, our identity in a particular way. So we don't care about these other groups who might be living in a very different manner. And you have seen that in many countries in the world where everybody cares about all these rights. You talked about rights, I mean, and implementation. We've only got these rights in the last 5 years, the right to work, NREGA, the right to education. April 1, this should have happened 60 years ago. How can it be that we live in a country where every child shouldn't be going to school? We still don't have a right to health care. We don't have a right to food security. You know, all these rights are just getting there.
There might be political will, but again, the financial resources, can we really afford something like right to education?
We can afford it, because what Oxfam India is doing is, we are saying we will raise money from these 300 to 400 million rich Indians. It's fine that the government has decided that aid shouldn't come to India, because we can afford to finance our own development. We're doing it through taxes, and we go and knock on doors, people's homes, talk to people in the offices and say, don't you want to get engaged in the development of your own country? And we are being actually very successful at it. People do want to engage. So they are willing to contribute, and finances should not be a constraint in a country that is as rich as ours.
Mr. Pimble, there's enough political will, but again, the financial resources, that's one problem. And also, as earlier I was asking you, is the developing world, you know, the developed world not showing enough sensitivity to the developing world when it comes to issues?
Yeah, you know, if you look at the financial crisis, in about a period of 1 year, the developed world could mobilize $18 trillion for actually saving the big banks, the big financial institutions and corporations. But if you look at the developmental track, in last 50 years, you have had not more than few $100 billion coming as a development aid. Why this disparity? Why there is a commitment towards rescuing certain sections of population and not rescuing certain sections of population? But that is a global inequities. Within the country also, as Nisha and Ashok Bharti have been pointing out, there are issues of inequities. You know, today, in spite of the financial crisis, the number of the Indian billionaires has gone up. Why?
The whole Gini coefficient problem, you know, rich is getting richer and poor is getting poorer.
Yeah. Well, actually, to some extent, that shouldn't bother us, because in the process of growth, that's what normally happens. I think what should bother us is the fact that the absolute number of the poor in our country has been very large, and it is not declining. There's no question that the incidence of poverty is declining. In other words, the proportion of the population has been consistently declining, and India as a country will achieve the MDG in respect of poverty reduction. You know, 37% of the population was poor in 1990. We'll be down to about sort of 18% or so by 2015. But that's not the real issue here. The real issue is the following, that our poverty line, for instance, has so far been defined at such a low level, and yet we have 300 million poor people, and the number of the poor has not declined in 30 years, although the incidence of poverty has been declining. Now, thankfully, we will have a new poverty line, which will mean that we will have a larger proportion of the population which will be entitled to many programs. So, Gini coefficients don't bother me at this stage. I think the real problem is too many people who are not getting into the loop, who are not part of the inclusiveness in the growth process.
So too many people who don't have the basic necessities in life, and again, who don't have the basic, they don't have food to eat, they don't have shelter. Coming to you, Mr. Pimple, now just 5 years to go for the 2015 Millennium Development Goals. What strategy should country like India have, to achieve these goals? As Mr. Mehrotra is saying that we will achieve these goals, but still, is it time to rework on a strategy? Apart from policies, we should also look forward to delivery and implementation.
Yeah, I would say the three things which are quite critical for the next 5 years. One is the citizens' engagement, those who have the entitlements of MDGs being empowered to track whether they are getting their entitlements or not, whether those entitlements are reaching or not. So the issue of demand side accountability to people, I think that is one critical issue. Second, as Santosh was pointing out, whether it is a design issue or the problems in the implementation process, they need to be plugged. Because otherwise the large resources, the policy framework, the legislative framework that India is really marching forward on will mean nothing for the majority of the Indian population. I think that's the second area that India really needs to look at. And the third area is that development agenda becomes a political agenda. It is no more, the political elections need to be fought on whether this party or that leader or the member of parliament or the legislator will deliver the developmental agenda in my constituency, and not on the basis of parochial interest or money power.
You think a very important point here, development agenda should become a political agenda. But as you said about the implementation and delivery problem, how do you think, when you frame up policies, how do you think government can actually rework its strategy of improving the implementation problem in areas like, as in NREGA we had concepts like social order and public hearing for the first time. Do you think it's hard, even in other schemes like Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, NRHM, we should introduce something as innovative, means more innovation is required in policy?
Absolutely, because we, while talking about inclusive growth and inclusive development, we also have to talk about more participatory democracy at all levels. And it's very interesting that we are doing this debate on the 13th of April and tomorrow is 14th of April. So in a way, what the vision that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar had in terms of justice, social justice, that has to get integrated. So we want growth with equity. And I think that is the direction in which we need to be going. And that I'm also quite confident at aggregate level, India will achieve number of goals at aggregate level. But as soon as you start disaggregating by gender, by social groups, the picture is very,
at aggregate level, we might achieve the goals, but when you start segregating, it might be difficult. Thanks very much, Mr. Pimpri, for joining us in this discussion. You have some urgent work, so you'll be leaving. Thanks very much for taking out your time from your hectic schedule and being with us. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Natasha.
So it's now time for us to take a short break. Next, when we come back, we'll talk about where are the gaps when we talk about the implementation of different schemes. Stay with us. Welcome back to the show. We are discussing the UN Millennium Development Goals 2015, the goals that promise to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, achieve universal primary education, promote gender equality and empowerment of women, reduce child mortality, improve maternal health, fight HIV/AIDS, malaria and other diseases, ensure environmental sustainability and develop a global partnership for development. Even you can join us live on our program now. You can call us on our toll-free numbers 1-800-115313 and 1-800-115314. In the third segment, we'll discuss the gaps and various problems in achieving these goals. Poverty is world's worst threat. Are our priorities misplaced? Accountability is a big problem. Doctors avoid duties. Teachers miss classes. Medicines are stolen. How central is good governance? Coming to you, Ms. Agrawal. Now, there's two things that are very important here, governance and economic policy. You cannot be a misgoverned state and then you hope that things will change and, you can really create and improve the condition of your people. So how do you look at the issue of governance here?
Well, in terms of the big gaps right now, I think one of the gaps in terms of governance would be in the framework itself, the policy and legislative framework. We believe that until all these health, education, etc., basic services are enshrined in rights, they will not reach every single citizen of India. So there are some gaps there, but by and large that framework is pretty good today. So then there are gaps in actual implementation. And there, because in the past it's just been a plethora of schemes that people don't even know about. It's very hard for them to demand accountability from the government for the implementation of programs that they are unaware of. What civil society does today is we say these are rights of every citizen and the responsibilities with the government. And our job is to inform people about their rights, organize them to demand their rights, and organize them to demand better governance. So it's this combination